A 15-year-old girl walked into a record label office in Nashville. She signed a contract, and she handed over the rights to every song she would make for the next 13 years. Most people would never recover from that deal. She became a billionaire because of it. But here's the part that never makes the headlines. Taylor Swift did not get to $2.1 billion by going on tour or selling records. She got there by doing something no artist had ever attempted before. She reverse-engineered the system that tried to own her, built a competing one from scratch, and then used her enemy's playbook to destroy him. This is not a music story. This is a business story. And it starts with the worst deal in pop history. Chapter 1. The worst deal in pop history. It's 2005. Taylor Swift is 15 years old. She has a guitar, a stack of journals full of lyrics, and a dream. A man named Scott Borchetta, who had just founded a brand new label called Big Machine Records, hears her play and signs her on the spot. Now here's the part that sounds completely normal in the music industry, but is absolutely insane when you say it out loud. The contract gave Big Machine Records ownership of the master recordings, the original studio files, of every song Taylor would record for the next 6 albums. Think of a master recording like the original negative of a photograph. Whoever owns it can print copies, license it, sell it, do anything with it. The artist gets royalties, sure, but the owner calls every shot. She signed because she was 15. She signed because she didn't know better. She signed because that is the deal in Nashville if you want to get your foot in the door. She had no leverage. Nobody does at 15. 13 years later, she would wish she had walked away. But she couldn't. Because by then, those 6 albums, Fearless, Speak Now, Red, 1989, Reputation, were worth hundreds of millions of dollars. And none of it was legally hers. Chapter 2. The $300 million Blindside. In November 2018, Taylor's contract with Big Machine finally expired. She had spent 13 years building one of the most valuable music catalogs in the world. And the moment she walked out, she made sure her new deal, with Republic Records at Universal Music Group, included one non-negotiable clause. She would own every master recording she made from that day forward. For one brief moment, she thought the old chapter was over. On June 30th, 2019, she woke up to an announcement. Scooter Braun, a music industry powerbroker who managed Justin Bieber and Ariana Grande, and who Taylor had publicly called her worst-case scenario, had purchased Big Machine Records for $300 million. He now owned all 6 albums. Every master. Every recording. The life's work of a 15-year-old girl, sold to someone who, in Taylor's own words, had spent years trying to undermine her. She tried to negotiate. Her legal team approached Braun's team about buying back the masters. According to Taylor, Braun demanded she sign a lifelong NDA. She would never be allowed to speak about him negatively again, before she could even see the financials. She refused. The sale went through. Most people would have sued. Most people would have gone quiet. Most people would have cashed their royalty checks and moved on. Taylor Swift did something that had never been done before at this scale. She decided to make the original recordings worthless. But wait, what happened to Scooter Braun after all this? I'll tell you in exactly 2 minutes. But first, understand what she did. Chapter 3. The most audacious IP strategy in music history. Here's the business move. Listen carefully, because this is genuinely genius. Under U.S. copyright law, while Scooter Braun owned the masters to her original recordings, Taylor still owned the underlying compositions, the songs, the melodies, the lyrics. She owned the blueprint. He owned one specific version of the building. So she built the same building again. From scratch. Better. Starting in November 2020, the exact date her contract allowed, she began re-recording all 6 albums. She called them Taylor's version. And then she did something brilliant beyond just re-recording. She added new songs. Vault tracks. Songs fans had never heard. She made the new version more valuable than the original. The results. Fearless, Taylor's version, 291,000 copies first week. Red, Taylor's version, 605,000 copies. Speak Now, 716,000. And then 1989, Taylor's version, 1.6 million units in a single week. Her biggest sales week ever. On a re-recording. of an album that already existed. Meanwhile, the original recordings, still owned by Shamrock Holdings, the private equity firm that bought them from Braun, became commercially dead. Streaming numbers tanked. Sync licensing dried up. Radio moved on. The business math was brutal. Why license the old version when fans loudly refused to stream it? Taylor had done something no legal team and no lawsuit could have. She made her enemy's asset worthless, not through courts, but through culture. And in May 2025, she bought back the original masters anyway.
I'm so sorry that, it's literally been so long since this happened. It's never come out that.
Shamrock sold. The war was over. And the Hollywood film move? That's where she didn't just win. She changed the rules for every artist after her. Coming up, Chapter 4, How She Built 13 Management and Took Control of Everything. Here's what most people miss entirely. While Taylor Swift was fighting for her masters, she was also quietly building an infrastructure most Fortune 500 companies would envy. She founded 13 Management, her own management company, named after her lucky number. This wasn't just about having people who work for her. This was about creating a machine. Legal capacity, trademark enforcement, licensing, deal-making. The company has filed over 400 trademark applications globally, covering everything from song lyrics to album titles to tour merchandise categories. Her own team, her own lawyers, her own negotiators. No label middlemen. And then she renegotiated the entire model of how an artist makes money. Her 2018 deal with Republic Records wasn't just about owning masters. It included a clause that if Universal Music Group, Republic's parent, ever sold its stake in Spotify, a share of those proceeds would flow to its artists. That's not a royalty. That's equity upside. Taylor Swift negotiated a clause that functions like a shareholder agreement, not an artist contract. She built merchandise companies. She negotiated brand partnerships with Coca-Cola, Apple, AT&T, generating an estimated $120 million in endorsement value, not as advertisements, but as carefully controlled brand alignments where her team dictated the terms. And she trademarked her own phrases. Swifties. Taylor's version. Even lyrics from her songs. Every revenue stream locked down. This is what billionaires do. They don't just earn, they build systems that earn on their behalf while they sleep. Chapter 5. The Move That Rewrote Hollywood. It's 2023. The Eras Tour is already the highest-grossing concert tour in history. $2.2 billion in ticket sales. Taylor has more money than she could ever spend. And she has an idea. Let's make a concert film. Simple enough, right? Except she walks into meetings with the major Hollywood studios, and they want what studios always want. Creative control, distribution fees, a cut of everything. They think they're talking to an artist who needs them. She walks out of every single meeting. Here's the part nobody talks about. The film almost didn't open as well as expected. There was a real mistake in the distribution rollout. Here's what she did wrong, and why it didn't matter. Instead, her father Scott Swift makes a phone call to AMC Theater's CEO Adam Aron with what he describes as a crazy idea. Taylor would self-finance the film, $10 to $20 million out of pocket, own it outright, and deal directly with theaters, cutting out every studio, every distributor, every middleman entirely. The deal they struck was unprecedented. Taylor kept 57% of revenue that would normally go to a distributor. She priced tickets herself at $19.89, a reference to her album 1989. She dictated the release terms. She announced it with 6 weeks' notice, which caused other studios to literally move their movie release dates out of the way. Christopher Nolan called her approach the future of movie making. Sony Pictures CEO called it a massive, unexpected rescue for theaters. Opening weekend, $93 million domestically. $261 million total global box office. The highest-grossing concert film in American history. Then Beyoncé did the same thing. Then the model was copied across the industry. As Taylor herself said in Time magazine, "Ultimately, I did what I tend to do more and more these days, which is bet on myself." That line is a business philosophy. Write it down. Chapter 6. What actually made her a billionaire? So let's zoom out. Because everything we've just covered follows a pattern. And that pattern is the real business lesson here. First, She identified every point where someone else profited from her work, labels, distributors, studios, and methodically cut them out. Not by fighting them, by building her own version of what they offered, then making their version obsolete. Second, she turned intellectual property into infrastructure. The masters, the trademarks, the 400 filings, the re-recordings. Most people think IP is a legal formality. Taylor Swift understands that IP is a cash-generating machine that compounds for decades. Third, she used culture as a business weapon. When she launched Taylor's version, she didn't file a lawsuit. She announced a cultural boycott. And because her fanbase follows her with an almost tribal loyalty, streaming platforms, radio stations, and sync licensors had no choice but to follow. She weaponized 200 million fans more effectively than any legal team on Earth. Fourth, she diversified at every level. Music catalog, touring, film, merchandise, brand deals, real estate, a portfolio worth an estimated $90 million across Manhattan, Rhode Island, Beverly Hills. Stock and startup investments estimated at $50 million. She built multi-channel revenue streams the way the ultra-wealthy always do, so that if one collapses, the rest holds. The Harvard Business Review wrote an entire book about her strategic genius. 4 behaviors they identified: targeting untapped markets, creating customer loyalty that borders on addiction, staying productively paranoid about threats, and adapting ahead of industry transitions. Not artist behaviors. CEO behaviors. Here's the thing about Taylor Swift that almost nobody says out loud. She didn't just win. She changed the rules for everyone who comes after her. Because of what she did with the re-recordings, artists across the industry now negotiate ownership clauses into their first contracts. Because of her theater deal, Beyoncé did it. The Rolling Stones looked at it. The precedent exists now. Because of her fight for masters, a generation of musicians understands what IP ownership actually means in dollar terms. She walked into that office in Nashville as a 15-year-old with no leverage. She walked out of it, 13 years later, as a woman who had already planned her next 3 moves. And every single move she made from that moment was built on one belief, that if she owned her work, she would never need anyone's permission again. $2 billion later, turns out she was right. And the most interesting thing, she got back the original masters in 2025. Every single album. She owns all of it now. The girl who had nothing legally owns everything she ever made. That's not luck. That's not talent. That's not even hustle. That is a 20-year business plan, executed flawlessly.